welcome to The Kill File, your favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Brittany, and each week we will explore the dark corners of true crime, unsolved mysteries, and murder. Join me as we uncover secrets, investigate evidence, and dive into the chilling details of some of the most fascinating cases. Get ready for a journey into the dark unknown, because in The Kill File, nothing stays buried forever. Hey guys, welcome to episode 11 of The Kill File. This story is called the Henryetta Massacre. So today's story was not only a recommendation, yay, but it's also a super sad story of a sleepover gone wrong back in April of 2023, so not that long ago. Trigger warnings for today is child murder, suicide, talks of pedophilia, and there will be a brief mentioning of childhood rape. There will be a disturbing description of a crime scene as well, and this includes some bondage items. So yeah, it's gonna suck, but I feel like maybe it was a good idea to share just to remind us parents that it's extremely important to know the people and families of the kids that we let our children spend time with or even spend the night with. So let's jump in. In the last weekend of April in 2023, a 13-year-old girl named Tiffany Guess asked a few of her friends if they could come over for a sleepover. Tiffany's family consisted of her mom, Holly Guess, her stepfather, Jesse McFadden, her older brother, Michael, who was 15, and her older sister, Riley, who was 17. Tiffany's friends, Brittany and Ivy, were allowed to go to the sleepover. On Saturday afternoon, Jesse McFadden, who was the stepfather of Tiffany, had picked up Brittany around noon, and the plan was for the girls to go to the mall and then to Main Event in Tulsa before having the sleepover. For those of you who don't have Main Event around you, it is a place where there's arcades, there's bowling, you can play some pool, there's food. It's a good time for the family. There were 2 girls who had received invitations, but they were unable to go. Apparently that evening, Ivy was Snapchatting with her mother for most of the evening. Then, the next morning, both Ivy and Brittany's parents received messages from their daughters that they were heading to McAllister to Jesse Fadden's family property. This, unfortunately, would be the last time anyone heard from Ivy or Brittany. The parents of both Ivy and Brittany said their daughters were supposed to be home Sunday night around 5 p.m. but had not shown up. So, when Monday arrived, it was said that the girls' parents, who were already worried and upset, really knew that something was wrong when they noticed that neither Ivy, Brittany, Tiffany, Michael, or Riley were on the school bus as it drove by. An Amber Alert was issued Monday at 10:29 a.m. for Brittany Brewer and Ivy Webster. Brittany's father, Nathan, posted on Facebook that his daughter was missing and that she had gone to McAllister, and the last contact with her was 10 a.m. Sunday morning. Ivy's mother, Ashley, posted a similar post saying that her last contact with Ivy was around 11 a.m. Sunday morning. It was also said that it was established that Ivy's tracking service on her cell phone had been shut off. On May 1st, 2023, there was a missing person alert that would unfortunately uncover a grisly scene. That same day, the gruesome scene had been discovered. Sometime between Saturday night and Monday, Jesse McFadden had killed Holly, Michael, Tiffany, Riley, Brittany, and Ivy in a murder or massacre and suicide. The bodies were found spread out around the property, some by the creek and some in the wooded area. There was also said to be, trigger warning, gunshot wounds in their heads. They were shot between 1 and 3 times each. So who was Tiffany Guess? Well, to answer that, we must first talk about her mother, Holly Guess. Holly Guess was a 35-year-old mother of 3, originally from El Paso, Texas, and she was said to have moved around a lot. Holly was described as an affectionate and loving mom. She was mother to Tiffany Guess, Michael Mayo, and Riley Elizabeth Allen. Holly was said to have been able to work from home by selling life insurance. Holly's mother, so the kids' grandmother, named Jeanette Mayo, said in an interview, quote, "She was a fantastic mother. She loved her children beyond belief. She was overprotective." The grandmother then went on to say she was supportive. If they wanted to do something, she'd go out 100%. End quote. I love this. It made my heart so happy to hear her described as this. I feel like this is what we all aspire to be like. Being supportive of my kids is like one of my biggest jobs as a mother personally. I want my children to always know that I have their backs and that no matter what they do, I will be there for them, never wavering. So when I was reading this about Holly and how the fact that she was also like this, it pulled at my heartstrings so badly, knowing that I could identify with how hard she seemed to try for her babies. Jeanette said that if one of the kids wanted to play football, then Holly would be the one in the family that would go out and buy the t-shirts or the sweatshirts for the entire family to support the team. Jeanette said she wasn't exactly sure how her daughter met McFadden, but that he had moved in with Holly and her 3 children not long after they had moved to Henryetta in 2021. Holly and McFadden were married in 2022. Jeanette said that the last time that she had seen her daughter or grandchildren was on the night of April 27th, when she had made the 2-hour drive to where they lived so that she could see her granddaughter, Tiffany, sing in what was said to be the last choir concert of the year. I love that. Good for her for showing up for her grandbabies like that. Riley Elizabeth Allen was a 17-year-old young woman who, by the account of her grandmother, was artistic and had some serious talent as a painter. It said that Riley had dreams of becoming an artist and also wanted to be a doctor because she wanted to help people. What a sweetheart. Michael James Mayo, who was said to be a 15-year-old boy who played football, ran track, and ran cross country. His grandmother described him as being a fantastic young man and said that he shared his birthday with his grandfather. Tiffany Dorr Guess was said to be a 13-year-old young girl who also ran cross country. She was a 7th grader who had just tried out for the cheerleading squad for her school and was also in the school choir. Her grandmother described her as the sweetest and most loving girl someone would ever meet. She said, quote, "We call her Tiffosaurus because when she'd get mad at you, she'd growl." I loved that description. It actually made me smile because my grandpa, who I called Papa, used to do this little growl when he was annoyed, and it's one of my fondest memories of him. So one of the 2 girls who were spending the night at Tiffany's house was Ivy Webster. She was said to be a 14-year-old young girl who was a lover of animals and whose mom said that she was just a great kid. Her mother said, quote, "She loved softball, she loved people, animals. She was just genuinely a good person, she really was." Brittany Brewer was the other young lady who accepted the invitation to spend the night at Tiffany's as well. Brittany wanted to be either a teacher or a veterinarian, according to her father. Brittany was said to be an outgoing person and had just been selected to be Miss Henryetta for a pageant that was coming up in July in Tulsa. Brittany's father, Nathan Brewer, said that the morning of the awful discovery, he had already woken up many times that night prior because Brittany hadn't responded back to any messages or even came home. He said when he woke up his wife and asked her if Ivy, Brittany's friend, was with Brittany, to which her mother said yeah. He then told his wife that Ivy's mom had just reported saying that she was missing. Ugh, the dread that would make my stomach feel is unfathomable. The autopsy showed that 2 of the victims had been sexually assaulted. This part is sad, so trigger warning, but both of the victims that had been a sleepover guest, Brittany, who was 15, and Ivy, who was 14, both had what was said to be blunt force injuries to their genital areas. Unfortunately, Ivy's parents and grandparents had also been told she was raped. The wife of Jesse McFadden had been reported to have, trigger warning, a gunshot wound to her head. Her leg and arm had abrasions, and there were also abrasions found on her children as well. It was said that the bodies were actually moved to where they were found from where they were originally killed because they said McFadden, quote-unquote, staged the scene before shooting himself. For what purpose, I have no idea, but this is the only time that this comes up, which I find interesting, and you'll find out later why. Who was Jesse McFadden, you may be wondering? McFadden was a 39-year-old man with an unfortunate history of run-ins with the law way before the Henryetta killings. McFadden was born in Kansas. He was also said to have dropped out of school after the 9th grade. McFadden was then living in McAllister when he started to get in trouble with the law. The first charge was for being in possession of alcohol underage. Not an unheard of charge for younger people, but this string of criminal acts would show to be a pattern for McFadden. Back in 2002, McFadden had admitted that he had stolen over $80,000 from his own grandfather, and then proceeded to plead guilty to a felony of grand larceny. Also during the year of 2003, he was caught for driving under a suspended license twice. Then, in 2003, he was also sentenced to 20 years in prison for, trigger warning, raping a 17-year-old girl at knife point, to which he pled no contest. While McFadden was in prison, he was then caught with a cell phone because a woman had reported that he was texting her for 3 months. After this, he was caught again in 2016 with a cell phone, and then he was charged in 2017 with sex crimes because of what authorities had found on that cell phone. He had apparently been using that cell phone to text an underage 16-year-old young girl. He received 1 felony count of sexting with a minor, and then he had a second felony charge of possession of juvenile pornography. Ugh, this sick fucker. And that was all from jail. Like, what the hell? How was he able to obtain these cell phones where he was able to even get a hold of this minor? And how did he get a hold of this minor? I just have so many questions. So despite all of these charges that clearly show a pattern of sexual criminal activity and problems with sexual behavior with minors, he was released in October of 2020 after what was said 85% of his sentence had actually been served. He, of course, was given some credit for good behavior. What part of him being caught with a cell phone and receiving charges counts as good behavior? That is absolutely unacceptable. So it said that when McFadden was released from prison, he was then arrested and placed into custody at a place called Muskogee, sorry if I butchered that, County Jail. And this was for the 2017 case of sexual indictments. But then he was released not long after this on a low $25,000 bond. It said that over the next few years, this case was delayed multiple times due to COVID. So McFadden was supposed to appear in court for the child pornography charges on the day that the bodies were discovered, which was on May 1st. A neat tidbit about this case is that many of the family members of the victims of this horrible crime were said to have worked with Representative Scott Fettgatter to pen House Bill 3992, which is called Knight's Law, and this would require people that are convicted of certain child sex crimes to have to serve their entire sentence. So not just the 85% like McFadden, but 100% of the sentence. And also, this irked me a little when I read this, not because of the law. I think it's fantastic and good for those family members. They probably had to work very hard for this. But just the fact that the law said, quote unquote, certain child sex crimes, like, why are these people not serving their entire sentence for all child sex crimes or even all child crimes in general? Don't let those fuckers out early. That's ridiculous. A defense attorney named Lee Berlin, who was based in Tulsa, said that he was surprised of all of the errors in McFadden's case. He said it was erroneous that McFadden was let out of prison despite the seriousness of the charges that were being brought against him, and was shocked at the quote-unquote low bail. He said, quote, "I'm a sex crime defense attorney. This is what I do all day, every day, and I'm like, how the hell does this happen? I can't even imagine being a sex crime defense attorney. How does one become that? Like, you know that so many of these crimes are probably legitimate, and to have to hear about these crimes day in and day out would make me sick. Unless these specific attorneys are people who just try to understand that these people are sick and are able to distance themselves from it. I don't know. I don't think I could do it. It was said that McFadden had already vowed in a series of text messages to the teenager that he had been texting while he was incarcerated that he would not return to prison. The screenshots that were found on the cell phone said that what he thought was his great life was crumbling, and he had actually blamed the teenager for the set of charges that were being brought against him. He blamed her for not dropping them. I'm not even sure if she could, but either way, what a douche. These charges could see McFadden sent back to prison for quite a long time. Apparently, a solicitation conviction could mean that McFadden would see a 10-year sentence And then the additional pornography charge could mean another 20 years as well, which good. He should have been locked away for a very long time. He obviously wasn't rehabilitated at all. In these text messages, McFadden went on to tell the minor that he did as he promised when he got out of prison. He said that he got a marketing job, that he was making great money. He went on to say that he had been working there for 2 years now and had made a great life, quote, like I promised I would do with you. Dude, you're talking to a child. What in the actual fuck? He's a fucking predator. Men or women like this who prey on the young minds of children or teenagers do not belong in society. On the screenshot, he had said, quote, now it's all gone. I told you I wouldn't go back. He went on to say, quote, this is all on you for continuing this. Ugh, what a douchebag. So, I'm going to give you a little bit of interesting information here to really drive home my point that grown-ass men and women who prey on young people are 100% predators by explaining to you what the brain of an adolescent person is actually like. Look, this is just my opinion, and I'm sorry if I offend anybody, but this is what comes to mind when I hear, famous or not, that some 50-year-old person is with some 18-year-old person because for some reason in our society, the day that somebody turns 18, they're considered an adult, yet the day before that, they're still considered a child. I don't know why this is, but in my mind, they're children for quite some time after they turn 18. I have heard about the prefrontal lobes in true crime many times that aren't fully developed or whatever, and this can be the time that serial killers or murderers are quote-unquote made by somehow combining sex with pain at one point during their childhood or adolescence. So I thought I would do a little research for any of us who are curious. So according to the National Library of Medicine, specifically the National Center for Biotechnology Information, or NCBI, and by the way, I will give you the shortened highlighted version because I could talk about this stuff all day long. It fascinates me. So according to the NCBI, during adolescence, our limbic system actually goes through some significant changes, which may impact self-control, decision-making, emotions, and risk-taking behaviors. This makes sense because I did some dumb shit before the age of 25 as well. By the way, this is speaking specifically from the ages of 10 to 24. So our brain during this time goes through some neuronal changes, or what they say is plasticity, which affects the acquisition of new skills. Specifically, plasticity increases an individual's vulnerability towards making improper decisions because the brain's region-specific neural circuit is still under construction. What this means is it's hard at this age to think critically and rationally before making complex decisions. A huge part of the brain development is happening during adolescence, including development to the frontal lobes, which is involved in movement control, problem solving, memory, spontaneity, language, judgment, initiation, impulse control, and also social and sexual behavior. Unfortunately, with this comes the continuous reconstruction of the prefrontal cortex, which is used in drug-seeking behavior as well. It goes on to say that the limbic system is composed of the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus, and these regions are involved in the feelings of pleasure that reward behaviors related to species survival, such as eating and sex. This made me giggle because at this age, we are literally hormonal food tanks, and any of us with teenagers can attest to the fact that that is absolutely true. Our cognitive and executive functional parts of our brains are not developed, which is part of our behavioral control. So the article goes on into great detail, breaking down the different areas of the brain that are affected by our hormones at this age, and the development of different areas, which I find extremely interesting. But my point in sharing this information as it pertains to this case is that when people like McFadden prey on our youth, this shows that people in their adolescent years, so again, from the ages of 10 to 24, aren't exactly fully capable of decision-making when it pertains to consequences, rationale, and judgment. So again, I say, these people are preying on our youth. All right, so back to the story. The Okmulgee police chief named Joe Prentice would not speculate on a motive, but said, quote, Everyone wants to understand why. People who perpetrate crimes like this are evil, and normal folks like us can't understand why they do it. I'm definitely one of those people who wants to know and needs to know why people do the things that they do. I don't know if we ever really understand, but I am definitely a person who seeks to understand people like this and figure out what makes people tick and why they are the way they are. I think many of us do. I can't just be like, oh well, I want to know more. And even if it's just pure curiosity, or maybe I feel a false sense of security thinking that the patterns will help me see things and keep myself and my children safe, I don't know, but I will never stop trying to figure out why. Jeanette Mayo, the kids' grandmother, if you remember, said, quote, Oklahoma failed to protect families, and because of that, my children, my daughter, and my grandchildren are all gone. I can't even imagine the pain that this woman has gone through and continues to go through on a daily basis. What surprises me, though, is that Oklahoma, and this is my own opinion, is one of the harshest punishment states that I know of just through being a true crime connoisseur. So, a spokeswoman for the Department of Corrections in Oklahoma named Kay Thompson said in her statement that McFadden had been able to earn credits for good behavior and attitude, and then for completing a program and education assignments that had been applied after he had served about 85% of his crime. She then added that apparently registered sex offenders are allowed to live with their own children or stepchildren, as long as those children are not the victims of the offender. The question that the Department of Corrections did not address is why McFadden was allowed to be released the way he was, despite the fact that he was going to be facing new felony charges. Apparently, prosecutors did object to any kind of early release from prison for McFadden, and they noted that McFadden had, trigger warning, tied a 17-year-old girl's hands and feet to bedposts, and then he cut off her shirt and raped her at knife point. He also apparently threatened to use the knife on her if she didn't shut up. That makes my stomach hurt. One source had said that the rape victim of McFadden and McFadden's own cellmate from prison had both separately contacted apparently several different law enforcement agencies to try and stop his release because they both claimed that he was a danger to the community. Oh my God, that is just absolutely awful. And then while this sick fuck is in prison for this, he gets charged again for sexting a teenage girl and having pornographic photos of a juvenile on his illegal prison cell phone. He was arrested and all, I guess, but he was let out of prison. And then he had a bail that was set super low. Make it make sense to me because it just doesn't. So Holly married McFadden in May of 2022. And it isn't really clear how much of his record she knew. Holly's mother stated that the family didn't learn about McFadden's criminal history until a few months earlier. She said, quote, "He lied to my daughter. He convinced her it was all just a huge mistake." Okay, so something that I read that was absolutely nuts to me was a report from a local news station after the killings had taken place. The family of Ivy wasn't given much of an update on the death of their daughter. So this poor family had to actually go looking for answers inside the home of McFadden themselves. They only invited one news outlet to join them for documenting what they were hoping to find. Answers. The news station, KFOR, local to Oklahoma, reported on what happened. Ivy's father, Justin, said that parents shouldn't have to go through what they have gone through, and he was extremely angry and wanting answers. Law enforcement had confirmed that Ivy had died from, trigger warning, a gunshot wound to the head. The report said at this time the family of Ivy wasn't able to say any kind of goodbye, they didn't have any type of closure, and they had more questions than answers. Ivy's father, Justin, apparently called the property owner to see if they could do a walkthrough of the house again. Justin said for some reason he felt like his daughter, even at that very moment, was standing behind him saying, quote, "Dad, keep going, keep doing this." So apparently the property owner said that they would need to get permission from law enforcement, which they apparently did. I was so confused about what was going on at this moment. Was this not a crime scene? Was this not already searched by law enforcement? I did read that because of where the property lies, there was some questions as to McFadden's registration, etc. I'm assuming they mean his sex offender registration. This was said to be the property that McFadden was renting. Anyway, after Ivy's family was granted permission into the property, Justin then explained that he felt inside of the house needed to be investigated, and he wanted this to be broadcasted. The news station rode with the family over to the Holly Road property to document this search. Apparently, the property owner's son unlocked the gate for everyone and let them in. So the report started off by saying that it would describe everything that was seen and that some of it was disturbing, which I already warned you guys about, so here we go. In the living room lay a twin-size bed upon the floor with a pink blanket strewn across it. In the corner, there were some computers hooked up, and an additional 2 computer towers and 4 computer monitors were found inside the house. There was a bedroom next to the living room, and the bed frame that was inside of this room had restraints bolted into it, and these restraints still had some chains attached. It noted there was a shelf in the room with witchcraft-related books on it. There was also said to be bondage and sex devices all over the room. In the kitchen, which was about 10 feet away, there had been another restraint that had been bolted to the kitchen counter, and there was said to be quote-unquote fresh locks and chains still attached to them as well. I'm assuming the fresh locks and chains is meant to say that they seemed pretty brand new. Inside the kitchen, it said there was trash everywhere, and those sticky pads for bugs was full of cockroaches. There was said to be a human dog collar, drug paraphernalia, handcuffs, and weapons that were still sitting out inside of the laundry room. Do you see what I mean by why the hell is this family having to investigate this themselves? Why was all of this not taken away as evidence or whatever? Like, I understand that that monster committed suicide, but that to me shouldn't mean that the case is just an open and shut one and no one is given any answers. These families must have been heartbroken, feeling like they needed a picture painted of what happened to their daughters, and now they are forced to be the ones seeing the crime scene? Like, what in the hell? Anyways, inside the laundry room was also a syringe that was filled with a dark substance. They also found a check made out to a storage facility from Holly Guess, and there had been a unit number on the check. There was also medication found to belong to McFadden, and it was sitting out. As the news station was still following the family around, they heard someone yell out that they found cell phones that had been tucked away in a cabinet. The news station reported that everyone rushed back to the laundry room. Justin then yelled out, quote, "That's them, babe, that's them." He was able to use his own phone to figure out if the phone that he had was Ivy's, and it was. He then shouted it was hers. Shannon, which is Ivy's grandma, said not to touch them but to call the sheriff. Again, I ask you, why is this poor family having to do this on their own? It said Justin stepped out of the room at this point and called the sheriff's office and had an investigator sent out to collect the phones. It said about 20 minutes later, the investigator showed up, and Justin told the investigator as he walked him to the cell phones, quote, "My daughter was locked up here, right here." It was said that while the investigator was taking pictures of the crime scene, Justin was said to be wondering why it took so many days to find and get this evidence. So here is the quote that Justin apparently said to the investigator. Quote, "That's what I just don't get. I know you guys are hurting too. I know you guys have a hell of a job too. You saw my daughter dead, shot in the head, and I know what you're seeing, and I know you went through a lot, but a lot of this stuff needs to be taken. You guys have to come back out here and do a whole nother sweep because you missed so much. There's medicine, there's drugs, brand new locks that he put in a brand new fucking key and lock on the counter. Why are we not getting receipts and video of him purchasing this shit? I'm sorry I'm venting, but I want more done." End quote. Yeah, that was my exact thought when I was reading and researching this case. I just don't understand either. I guess it said that the investigator was quiet during Justin's vent, but then said, quote, "The problem is I don't know what else to do." After this, Justin was basically saying what I was just saying, that there's a story to be told, to which the investigator agreed. While this is true, the investigator and Justin both agreed that the person who could really tell them what happened was dead. But Justin reiterated that they could all try to piece it together. Apparently, the conversation continued this way as blame was being put on the investigator, to which he told everyone that he was not one of the people who swept the house on Monday, which must mean the day that everything was found. The investigator said they were open to suggestions that the family wanted to give them. I just don't understand that. I guess one of the friends of the family who was there said, quote, "The whole world is going to know," end quote. And he was speaking to the quote-unquote mishap of this investigation. When the investigator asked what that would accomplish, Justin then said, "I'm a grieving parent that my daughter got raped and murdered, and you're telling me right now that I don't have a right to know what happened. The story's right here. It's right here, and it's still sitting here. Still," end quote. And at this point, he was yelling. After this, Justin left the area while Ashley, Ivy's mother, and the investigator spoke back and forth about a few things. Justin came back in the room and apologized to the investigator for having yelled at him. When Justin then asked for a stronger investigation and a sweep of the entire property, the investigator said, quote, "That's something you're going to have to talk to somebody above my pay grade about," end quote. Oh my God, I was absolutely speechless when it came to this conversation. And I found this information towards the end of my research, so to read what this family had to go through right after losing their daughter made my blood boil for them. I just cannot wrap my head around the fact that they had to do any of this in the first place. Why? Why the hell were the cops not taking this stuff in the first place? They found all this stuff even after the initial sweep was done. I didn't even read anywhere a timeline of what happened to these poor children. Like nothing. No story at all. Why? One of the big questions that had surrounded this case was whether or not McFadden had planned to kill all of these people or not. After this happened between the investigator and Ivy's family, the news station reached back out to Justin the next day, which was Friday, and asked if anything new had happened, because when the news station reached out to Okmulgee PD, the Okmulgee Sheriff's Office, and the OSBI, which is the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, and the Okmulgee District Attorney's Office, and asked who was the lead agency that was going to be in the investigation on this case, the only agency that even responded was the OSBI. So I guess the investigator had told Ivy's family that OSBI was the agency responsible for the search inside of the home. The OSBI confirmed that they were inside the home, but only to help the Okmulgee PD in the search. The OSBI responded to the news station that their department would continue to give their support and assistance to law enforcement partners and grieve with all of the families of this quote-unquote horrible event, and that the investigation was still ongoing. I don't know how it was still ongoing, but okay. So after this, Justin said Friday when the news station reached back out that he had returned to McFadden's home and found even more evidence. He found receipts for the padlocks that had been attached to those restraints, and the receipts showed that he had purchased them a few days before the murder or massacre and suicide. He also found a list of names in the home and their birthdays, and Ivy's family believes that this list was a list of the victims' names. Justin said they also found a bloody wet wipe inside the home. He said they also found 5 more cell phones and drug paraphernalia. He said this was the 3rd time they had searched this home on their own and they kept finding evidence. They called law enforcement to come back out and take more evidence, and apparently law enforcement told him to leave the property immediately and that the owner planned on cleaning the house on Monday. Okay, this whole situation right here is just absolutely fucked. Like, what in the actual hell is happening out there? That poor family, oh my God. I am super pissed for them. They deserve answers, and they deserve to know what happened to their daughter and not to have to do the investigation themselves. Are you kidding me? My heart goes out to the Webster family and what they had to go through with this whole situation. It just makes me sick. Why in the hell were the authorities not out there doing their damn jobs and figuring out what the hell happened during this massacre? I was curious about the extra cell phones myself. Like, is there any missing young girls around this area? Have the authorities made sure that he wasn't connected to any other cases that might be unsolved? I am trying, once again, to put myself in the authorities' shoes and see their side. And I thought, well, maybe since they don't have a suspect to chase after or whatever, they don't feel like they should use the manpower to do this investigation. But to me, that's absolute bullshit. One, because they supposedly already swept the house, which means all of the evidence should have been taken, not just a few pieces here and there. And also, if they had something more pressing to use the manpower on, I can understand that. But then why not do one thorough sweep of the house, collect the evidence, and then tell these poor families that they would get them answers and piece together what happened for them as they could with the resources they had? I don't blame this family one bit for being so upset, wanting to know what in the hell happened to their daughters. This whole thing seems to be botched from the fact that this sicko was released when he clearly shouldn't have been, to the investigation on this case. This whole thing is absolutely nuts. When I was watching the police officer during the press conference, you could hear the interviewers ask if they thought that the teens were maybe running based on where they found them, and the officer straight up says they have no idea. Then someone asked if they thought it was planned, and he said they have no way of knowing. This makes me so mad because obviously if they searched the house correctly, they may have been able to find out if it was planned or not. I mean, Justin did find the receipts from a few days before. One reporter at the end asked what was going to be done to bring this case to closure and asked what the next step in the investigation was to do that. He basically told her that they talked to the families before the press conference and basically said they won't get a story because the people who know what happened are gone and there is no prosecution to be had. So I got the sense that the reporters are like the rest of us and want them to try to piece together what happened to bring closure to the story and the families of these poor girls. It seems like the police are only interested in the fact that there isn't someone to prosecute, so what's the point? Again, this is just my opinion. He did close by saying that he didn't think that Ivy or Brittany's parents did anything wrong and that they, meaning the parents, were devastated and that we should all know where our kids are and who they're hanging out with. Shout out to the KFOR news station for going into the house with the Webster family and having their backs on their own investigation that they were forced to try and do themselves. This was the only source I found with the real story of how this investigation went, and I think it's awesome they told the whole story. The families of both Brittany and Ivy had both set up memorials outside of their homes after this, and it said at least one of them had what was said to be a mailbox outside of their home specifically for this incident so their friends could come and share their memories. Ivy's father, Justin, said, quote, "Ivy was robbed from all of us. She was going to do great things in the world just based off who she was, and we want to be able to keep that doorway open to communication with her and be with her. Her friends will come out here and sit on the bench and swing and just hang out," end quote. That part made me tear up, thinking that this family sees their daughter's friends come out to their home and just try to be closer to the friend that they lost at such a young, pivotal age, and that clearly these young kids touched so many lives. Another of Tiffany's friends said that when they were walking into school after the tragedy that everyone had been quiet, silent, and sad, and some kids were crying. One of the girls, Anika, who was best friends with Tiffany Guess, was also invited to the sleepover, but she had to tell her bestie, Tiffany, that she didn't know if she could spend the night that day. She said Tiffany responded, "Okay," to which Anika texted back and said maybe she could the next weekend. Anika talked about her best friend and all of the activities that they did together, saying they enjoyed riding bikes, swimming, roller skating, and commenting that it would be hard without her. The mother of Anika, named Valerie, said that her daughter had spent the night at Tiffany's house before and that she didn't get a good feeling. She explained it wasn't necessarily a bad feeling, but that she said with her own tuition, it had kind of told her that she wouldn't go back. She also touched on the fact that the devastation that her daughter was going through was something that she herself had never prepared for. She said that she just had to explain to the children that the world isn't innocent and that life isn't always easy, but that with the support of your friends and your family, it's the only way to get through life. She said to the parents out there, just always talk to your kids, as she said she wished that Tiffany could have reached out to them and told them what was going on at home, but that she never did. The interview of Anika was absolutely heartbreaking, as this little girl broke down crying and said, "I need her." Oh, it broke me watching this little girl be so emotional after losing her best friend at such a young age. Brittany's father, Nathan, said during the vigil, that was said to be attended by hundreds of people, that, quote, "It's just a parent's worst nightmare, and I'm living it," end quote. My heart aches for these parents. This next pair of quotes had me openly weeping, and I'm not much of a crier. My want in sharing this story, because at first I wasn't going to because it was just so sad, But in the end, I realized that if we can learn something from all of these people's suffering or share their stories with others and help just one person who hears this maybe think it through before letting their child go to this place or that, then it will have been worth listening to. And that is not me blaming the parents in this case by any means. This was absolutely not their fault at all. But the story is real and it happened. And if we can take something away from it, then it's worth listening to. That's all that this is, just learning about the unfortunate people who surround us each and every day. And listening to the stories of the victims and their families and shedding light to a very real area of our lives and our world that we sometimes want to pretend doesn't exist. But it does. It's in all of our neighborhoods and it's in all of our lives. This world is such a beautiful but scary place, and I hope that nothing like this happens to any of us. But let's keep these victims' memories alive by continuing to share their stories and learn and listen and engage with each other and help each other. Okay, so Nathan Brewer, Brittany's father, said, quote, "Love your family members every day before they walk out the door, whether it be to school, work, to an event, because you never know. You never know." Then Ivy's father said that if he could have another moment with his daughter, that he would just embrace her. He said, quote, "I would hug her and I wouldn't let go." As I was researching this story, I came across a video that Justin Webster posted not that long ago of Ivy's little brother talking to Justin in the kitchen. And Justin was listening to what was said to be one of Ivy's favorite songs. That song that's at the very end of all the Twilight movies. If you know which one I'm talking about, it's already such a sad and beautiful song. Well, while Justin was listening to this and what looked like remembering his daughter, the little boy came up and he had asked where his mother was. And then he mentioned that it was one of Ivy's favorite songs. And then he said a few other things that I couldn't really understand. But then this little boy, who was maybe 5, just started bawling, like sobbing in his dad's arms. The caption of the video was something to the tune of, "This is what these families have to go through, these random moments of grief for their daughters, and that this is what grief from a little brother looked like." This video absolutely gutted me. I could not take the tears from this father and son embrace, and hearing this little brother sob the way he did for his older sister, it literally made my stomach hurt. Like, I could not get the image of the video out of my head for days. I can't even imagine what these families have gone through. They have been very vocal speaking out against pedophilia and the law that they helped create called the Knight's Law. They even have the moment that Ivy's mother found out that her daughter was no longer alive on their social media platforms. Talk about gut-wrenching. Oh my God, it will ruin your day. These poor families, we all need to honor these children and these families by hugging and telling our loved ones and our children just how much we love them today. Okay, that is the story of the Henryetta Massacre that occurred in just 2023. It's also the story of a fucked up pedophile, murderer, and rapist. I wish so much that the story would have ended differently for these families. That poor grandmother losing not only her daughter, but her grandchildren as well. Like, what the fuck, man? This is just my opinion, but he said he wasn't going to go back to prison, and that's fine. If you want to take yourself out because you're a piece of shit and you don't want to stand up and go back to prison and face the crimes that you committed, then fine. If you want to take yourself out, then take yourself out. But why in the hell did he have to take his wife, his stepkids, and these other 2 absolutely innocent kids for no reason? Like, what is that? Why? I just don't understand it. These senseless acts of violence is what scares the shit out of me. It doesn't make any sense, and it's shit like this that makes me never want my children to leave my home. I know that we need a balance of teaching our kids about how beautiful the world can be, and that some risks are worth taking. But there is another very dark side of the world that we all know about when it comes to parenting, but it's like, how much do we share and tell our kids? How do we prepare them for the fucked up part of the world that is in our everyday lives without depressing our children and making them like agoraphobics? I myself struggle with this because I don't like to lie to my children. I like to prepare them for the real world. Not all of us have experienced sunshine and rainbow lives, and I'm always afraid that if we pretend that that's what the world is for our children, they won't know how to handle the tragedy that's around us all the time when they grow up one day. It's almost like trying to keep a balance of, hey, there's some seriously sick people out there that will snatch you given the opportunity to do so, and here's what we can do to keep ourselves safe and aware of what's going on all around us. And then it's versus life is short and can be so wonderful. So take chances where you can and do and see what you want while you have the time here on Earth. Oh boy, parenting is fun. Anyways, I want to wrap this up by saying thank you guys so much for the recommendations for cases. I get so excited when my listeners engage with me and reach out to me. I can't even tell you guys what it means to me. My family can attest to my excitement. So don't stop. Reach out on the website or on social media to give me case ideas or comment on any posts to share your thoughts and opinions on these cases. I did add a submission website form where you can suggest cases in case you're not on social media or you didn't want to comment on there. But this is all really part of the reason that I do this. I want to talk about these things and about all of the feelings that I get from hearing this stuff, and I'm pretty sure that my own family gets sick of hearing me blab on about this stuff that I find so interesting, and the psychology, and the medical parts, and the stories. So doing this podcast is a perfect outlet to talk and share with the world my passion of true crime. So share it with me. Have a wonderful rest of your day, guys, and I will see you next week for another episode of The Kill File. Bye! Well, that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today and listening to another episode of The Kill File. If you want to share your thoughts on what we covered today, suggest a case for me to check out, or if you're just bored and looking for something to do, you can head over to The Kill File's social medias and reach out. We're on Facebook and Instagram as The Kill File, and we're on YouTube and TikTok as The Kill File Podcast. Also, feel free to check out our website at thekillfile.com, where you can learn more about me, your host, and a little bit more about how The Kill File got started. I love hearing from you guys. Come back on Mondays, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, when we will cover another case on The Kill File, where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye!